Hi, welcome to the Modern Persian Food Podcast. We're food bloggers Bita Arabian
and Bita Nazem Kelly.
We're here to share with you the rich flavors and fresh ingredients of Persian cooking and how to incorporate them in today's modern lifestyles.
We are excited to introduce you to the flavors, tastes, and techniques we use, and also our own cultural stories and perspectives growing up in the U.S. in a Persian family. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to episode number 11 of the Modern Persian Food Podcast. Tahdig is the crunchy, crispy, caramelized rice crust from the bottom of a pot of Persian rice. Today, we're going to talk about the main ways to make it, the different ingredients we use when we make it, and also our favorite ways to eat it. So with that, let's start. Bita Jun, let's talk about Tahdig.
Hi, Bita. This is one of the most famous parts of Persian food. And I think that if someone asks about Persian food or if they've tried it, it seems like it's the first thing that comes up.
I agree. When you think about Persian food or when people think about Persian food, Tahdig is always talked about.
Yes, it's coveted. Growing up, if you had a big family, it was probably the thing that everybody was sort of fighting over. Because when you think about it, there's a limited supply.
Right.
It's just the surface area of the bottom of a pot of rice.
Exactly. And depending if you use saffron or not, the color is really like this beautiful caramelized golden brown color, which is super delicious and crunchy.
Yes. It's a delicate balance of getting that right cooked golden crunch. So tahdig is beautiful. In a traditional sense, it's part of the presentation. I think Iranians and Persians take a lot of pride in making a beautiful presentation, a lot of times at formal gatherings or informal. Anytime you're having people over or even extended family, it's going to be a spread. But the queen of the table is this mold. When you turn the rice pot upside down and you take the pot off and the rice is kind of molded into this shape with the bottom of the pot, as you described, on the very top in a beautiful way.
And there's actually a few different kinds of tahdig, right? So I think there's three main kinds of tahdig, although I definitely have seen people experiment with using lettuce or using different things as their tahdig. But let's talk about like the three main ways. What's your favorite way of having tahdig?
My favorite flavor of tahdig is bread tahdig. The traditional way is with using lavash, the thin Persian bread. I do make it that way, and I like things to be healthier when possible. I feel like I'm getting enough of the white carbs with the white rice, which I enjoy. So with the tahdig, I'll take a healthier route and I'll look for a whole wheat lavash, which I can actually find in a lot of places these days. Or I'll use whole wheat pita, which we always have a bunch of as well. But my all-time favorite and easiest way to make bread tahdig is using a tortilla. That's my modern version, and even have my pot is like perfectly the size of like a medium tortilla. So that's my all-time favorite.
So basically the first step of making tahdig is starting to make the rice. So you parboil your rice. We've talked a little bit more in depth about how to make rice and the different rice dishes in our second episode. So you can learn more there if you want more specific steps. But in summary, basically you parboil the rice in water with salt and a little bit of oil. In my version, when the water is all absorbed, you take it out of the pot and you put on the bottom of the existing pot oil. And in the version that Bita Jun was just talking about, you put the tortilla down and then you cover that with the parboiled rice. And then you'll put some layers of paper towel in between the lid of the pot and the pot itself for the rice to actually steam and for the bottom of the rice to actually turn a little bit crunchy and get a nice little crust to it. The other way that you can parboil your rice is the way that Bita likes to do it, where you parboil it in salty water. And then when the rice gets to the right consistency, then you drain all of that water out. So you're not looking to absorb all the water. So it kind of depends on which approach you're going to take. But the same process applies to the different types of tahdig that you want to make. So instead of putting bread down, you can put some of the other variations. You can have plain regular rice. And again, you just mix that with a little bit of oil and a little bit of water, and you have that on the bottom of the pot. You lay that down, and then you add the additional rice. You can add bloomed saffron to that rice on the bottom, which I love. And also the other way to make it is actually with slices of potato. And we'll get into the little process of that. But those are the three main types of tahdig, is the bread tahdig, the rice, and the potato.
Two really, really important steps, in my opinion. One, I've figured out the hard way is to make sure to have a good nonstick pot. Pot technology's come a long way, and having a new pot with Teflon and making sure that it's nonstick has made a world of difference. And as much as I try to cut down on oil, you have to have some oil and or butter mixture for it to taste like it's supposed to taste and to have that really nice golden crunch. Also, I will often put some of the Bloom dissolved saffron right in with the oil, heat it up, swirl it around a little before I lay my tortilla or bread or potatoes down. Then I will salt it. And depending on if it's tortilla or potato, sometimes, this is a version, is you can also mix a little yogurt with your parboiled rice and your saffron. And this makes it really delicious. Just a little bit in a little bowl to kind of cover and pat down that tahdig on the bottom, and then layer in the rest of the parboiled rice and cover your lid with the dish towel or bonnet, and then cook it the rest of the way. Now, what you do have to do, though, is you have to cook it on a higher heat for about 5 minutes, depending on your stove and your pot technology. Again, is just like trial and error.
Yeah.
Is figuring out how long to keep it a little bit higher, medium high, to kind of get the toast, and then turn it down to simmer. Some people will open the lid and pour some water and then poke the holes and then kind of get the steam going before they turn it down to simmer and cook the rest of the way. Is this all sounding like how you often do it, Bita June?
Yeah, it does. You know, I'm curious about the yogurt. I don't usually add the yogurt, but I've heard that before. What does the yogurt actually do? Does it make it like a thicker crust of a tahdig?
I guess it does make it a little bit of a thicker crust. I don't do it with bread, tahdig. I only do it with the potato. You know what it makes it taste like? It makes it taste more like tahchin, which is our chicken and rice casserole. And that has yogurt and eggs. And some people even put egg yolk into the yogurt small layer that you put on top of your potato tahdig.
Okay. But you could also just make it with regular rice too. Do you ever do that with your tahdig? Do you ever just use regular rice, not bread or potatoes?
Yes. To me, the number one easiest way, I just use my rice cooker. And it depends on what brand of rice cooker you have and what size. I just simply put 2 cups of rice, 3 cups of water, the salt in, and a little swirl of oil. And then I put the paper towel, not actually use a dish towel, on bonnet on the lid, and I turn it on and I leave. And then if I want to try to go for tahdig in my rice cooker, there's a cook mode. And then after it's gone through the cook period, it automatically clicks over to like a warm mode where it just keeps it warm.
Yeah.
But if I push my button down on my rice cooker again, it will go back to cook mode and it'll stay hotter. So I'll basically just keep it hotter longer, and if I'm lucky, a tahdig will form. How do you do rice tahdig?
Yeah, that's how you make it, essentially. It's just letting the bottom cook more. What I do is when I want to make the tahdig, I do actually empty it out. And that's because I want to add saffron to the tahdig. You can make a tahdig very simply, as like you just described, by just cooking the rice longer and having the crust form on it.
You know, the whole process takes half hour to 45 minutes for a small portion. And the taste and flavor and texture experience of rice tahdig is, to me, sort of like popcorn. I like it with salt. It's really crunchy.
I think potato is actually my favorite.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you love it because it tastes like French fries?
French fries and chips and hash browns. Yeah, it reminds me of all of that. Tell me more about potato tahdig.
Potato tahdig is the most difficult to me as far as effort goes. I will peel a potato, and I'll use not a big, huge russet baking potato and not a baby potato, but like a golden medium-sized potato. I find those to be buttery and nice, and I'll peel the skin off of it with a peeler. And then I actually have a mandolin, and it doesn't take very many. But what I like about using the mandolin is it slices them fairly thin, so the potato will cook. You can adjust the thickness on the mandolin for slices. But if you don't have a mandolin, you just do your best to try to slice them evenly. And then obviously, given the shape of a sliced potato, there's going to be space in there. So that's why I do the yogurt and sometimes with an egg, almost like a tahine little mixture to tuck it down and smush it down in the space that's not potato. How do you do it?
I do it pretty similar. I don't actually peel my potato.
Oh.
And I frankly don't really care what kind of potato it is. I'll use a russet, but usually a russet potato is bigger, so I'll usually have the extra slices of potato. And I don't slice it so thin like on a mandolin. I probably slice it like between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch thick. And I'll lay it all flat, put a little oil down. I don't always use saffron when I make potato tahdig, but I'll put the slices of potato down. And then in those little gaps that you were talking about, I actually just cut a slice of potato into like triangle shapes and kind of like mosaic basically of the little pieces. And so I can try to have as much coverage on the bottom of the pot. And then that's when I put the parboiled rice on top of it and then continue with like the steaming as we described earlier. The easiest way to do it is within a nonstick pot. And you don't have to flip it out. Once the rice is done, you could always just pour the rice out and then kind of pull the tahdig out. If you don't have a nonstick, what you can do also is put a layer of parchment paper down on the bottom of the pot. Put a little bit of oil, put parchment paper down, and then build your tahdig on top of that. And that's another way to do it in a regular pot.
My mind is blowing. I have not ever heard of putting parchment paper down. I am just like freaking out about putting parchment paper in my pot. I always have so much parchment paper because I'm a big baker.
I love parchment paper.
I use it like crazy. I put it down on the counter. It's great because it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. You come from a bigger family. It's just my brother and I, but you have multiple brothers.
I do.
I kind of remember you telling a story about somehow your mom making extra tahdig.
Yeah. So my parents would entertain a lot growing up. And so there was always like a lot of rice. And everyone loves the tahdig. So my mom would make like 2 pots of rice, not because she needed more rice. I mean, that was obviously like the outcome of it, but because to make more tahdig.
Oh, so you just had a lot of rice.
Because everyone loves the tahdig. Usually there was like a bunch of the tahdig that would stay in the kitchen. Like the food would all be served and then you bust out with a tray of tahdig.
Wow.
So it's not like the first people get all of the tahdig, but the latecomers can still get tahdig too.
I want to come to your mom's house. So my mom, she always does the method of taking the rice out and then scraping the tahdig out. I'm glad you've talked about that. It's not always the formality of flipping the pot and having the perfect mold.
Right.
Sometimes it's just scraping off the bottom and sometimes it sticks.
Yeah.
But it's almost always delicious.
Yeah, it still is. If you do flip out the rice out of the pot into a platter, something to do to ensure that your tahdig actually stays crispy is lift the tahdig with your spatula, your serving spatula, kind of go right underneath the tahdig and lift it up a little bit off of the rice and let the extra steam come out. Because if you kind of let it just sit on the rice, sometimes the steam can make it a little bit, not soggy, but not as crunchy.
If you're flipping out your rice, what we mean is that when it's finished cooking, you've taken the lid off, and you want to try to go for the cool presentation of the rice mold, you got to be really careful.
Yeah.
So you have to embrace it and not be afraid. It's important to find the right size of platter or plate to go over your pot.
Right.
It can't be too big and obviously can't be too small. It should be just a little bit bigger than your pot. And then depending on what kind of pot you have, you may need to wear oven mitts or use a dish rag to protect your fingers while still getting a good grip, because you really got to be able to grab on. So you remove the lid, you put your right size plate over the pot. You have to hold on to the pot and the platter. And then I flip it towards myself. And then I set it down on the counter or table, and then I remove the pot.
You do have to definitely put it down and then carefully lift it off. And hopefully you have this beautiful cake of rice with a golden, crispy tahdig on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could just keep talking about tahdig all day long.
I could.
The Ask the Beats of this week comes from Carrie from Atlanta, and she is asking, what is the difference between Western hamburgers and Persian kebabs?
So one big difference is that with Persian kebabs is the shape. Kebabs they're oval in shape. If you want to make them in a pan, you can make them oval in shape and flip them on a pan, or The traditional way is on a skewer, and then they're squeezed onto the skewer, and they're completely different in shape. The other thing is they almost always have a lot of onion in them. Onion that's been grated and squeezed and mixed into the ground beef, and sometimes a little bit of lamb.
Yeah, there could be just plain beef, there could be lamb, there could be a mixture of it. You can even make it with ground chicken if you wanted to. It has seasoning also, like turmeric and salt and pepper and the grated onion mixed into the meat mixture.
Or saffron. I like it with saffron.
The skewer is like a wide, flat skewer, and you actually put it over a flame to really get like kind of like a char broiled on the skewer. And there's like an art to actually putting it on the skewer and flipping it in a way so that the meat doesn't actually fall off. The Persian kebab, you need to really work the meat. You basically knead the meat until it becomes a little bit pasty, whereas like a more Western American hamburger, you don't actually work the meat very much. The less you work it, the better. The shape and the texture of it is a little bit different from the meat kebab.
Yeah, and of course, how you eat it. American burgers usually in a bun, or even these days, you can get it on a salad, I guess, a patty. But the traditional way of eating Persian kebab is with rice. I have seen people eat it rolled up in lavash.
Yep, like a little wrap. A lot of times with sumac on top of it.
Yes.
And maybe a charred tomato on the side of it as well.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. And thank you everyone for listening. That was the Ask the Beats segment where we take questions from our listeners. So feel free to shoot us an email at hello@modernpersianfood.com or reach out to us on social media, and we'd love to incorporate your question into our next episode.
Thank you. Until next time. Bye.
So you've been listening to Modern Persian Food with Bita and Beata. Thanks for spending time with us. If you enjoyed what you heard today, consider telling your friends or giving us a good rating on iTunes. You can subscribe to our show for free on your favorite podcasting app or find us online at modernpersianfood.com for recipes and info that we talked about today. Thanks so much. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and see you next time.